a lot of heterosexual men don't like women for real. They don't. They like women sexually, but they don't like women. They're not attracted to what a woman is outside of her sexual organs.
Experience Karen Hunter in a completely different way. Karen Hunter is awesome. The podcast.
If you like me on SiriusXM Urban View Channel 126, you're gonna love me. And Karen Hunter is awesome. Hey, this is Karen Hunter, host of the Karen Hunter Show on SiriusXM's Urban View. Karen Hunter is awesome is an actual podcast to bring heat and energy and knowledge and power. A 1-2 punch that I don't think you get anyplace else. Tell the truth. So check out the podcast wherever you get your podcast. You will not be disappointed.
So then when we get into why a lot of men womanize, or why it's just they're minimizing a woman based off of who she slept with or who she potentially can sleep for, it because it's like you haven't gained the appreciation of the wholeness of a woman yet and what that wholeness of a woman can bring to your life. A lot of times we'll talk about strength and we'll say men are stronger than women, but that's because we value physical strength. We're not talking about emotional strength, spiritual strength. Yeah. We're not talking about the type of strength that can run a household. And we're not putting that same type of weight. And what I would encourage, and this was the shift that I had to do, is I had to start liking the wholeness of a woman outside of sex. And then when you do that, now you appreciate the things a complete woman can bring to your life. When we talk about the Bible talks about finding a capable wife, right? That capable wife, that person that if you was to stumble, can pick up the ball and start running. And there's a lot of men that have just a wife because they was only concerned about what she can do in the bed. Yeah. And so what I'm just encouraging men to do is just like, and it's for our own benefit, because a lot of us, especially men with some type of means, we end up finding a dependent, not a partner. Yeah, she can fuck us good. But if you was able to stumble, bro, what the fuck is gonna happen with your family? And so I just encourage men to be, I'm not gonna say more, because that's unrealistic to a lot of men, but as attracted to what she brings as a feminine energy to your life outside of just what you're doing.
Oh, ace metaphor with Cam Newton. He's talking directly to Cam Newton, to his face. I was like, he's talking about you. He's talking about you. This resonated with me. Kevin Powell is here because this conversation I've been having with a lot of my male friends as well. I remember having a conversation with one fellow in my life, and he was married. There's nothing going on with us, but I'm like, every time you have a problem, you're calling me. Where's your wife? Well, I can't talk to her. I said, so why did you marry her? Don't call me. You should have married somebody that you can have these conversations with. And I thought about you, because you're somebody, as we're talking about people reading, you're somebody that actively worked and pursued your manhood in a whole way. And, when I see you, somebody who has worked through your struggles with yourself to become who you are today, and when I see you with your wife, I smile, because there is this, partnership. She's one of the producers of your film. She's out there and she's quiet, but she's not. I can tell that that's a strong woman, even though she ain't going to say a whole lot, But talk a little bit about that transformation and having friends with, being friends with Bell Hooks and Audre Lorde, like as mentors. That's a pursuit of something that most men would not sit in, that level of feminism.
I mean, first of all, shout out to Ace Metaphor for having the courage to say those things. And he made me think about something that Tracee Ellis Ross said a couple weeks ago that has got a lot of responses in different ways, that she doesn't even date men in her age range because she feels that a lot of men who are past 50 are toxic, which is a tragic thing to hear. But where's the lie in that? Because I know, as someone in my 50s, and I know a lot of heads in their 40s and 50s who simply don't want to grow up. I can't say, I had a lot of guidance. I didn't have a father figure there, at the first 18 years of my life, there was nothing. But my mother did plant some seeds, which was, don't be like your father. I didn't know what I should be, but I was like, okay, clearly he's no good, because, as sisters say, these men ain't no good, so these things are planted there. But what I did get was that, I needed to go a different course. But of course, when I got to college, is when it began to run off the rails, because college is just a sexual playground. You know, I'm glad I went to college, but if a lot of us, it doesn't encourage real relationships. It doesn't encourage anything other than just having a good time for a lot of us. And we used to think that the few brothers or males that we saw who were in committed relationships longer than a semester, that there was actually something wrong with them, which is insane when you think about it. You know, like when I meet people now who say, this is my high school sweetheart, my college sweetheart, men, you know, or even men who may say, this is someone I date that I like, I've known since I was in grade school. You know, it's very rare because we're encouraged to see y'all as sexual objects, as mother figures, an extension of our mothers, to be caretakers, to take care of us. And it doesn't encourage growing up. You know what I mean? And this is something my wife Evangeline and I talk about. I want to name her Evangeline because she is my equal partner in every way. We talk about all this stuff on a regular basis. She has challenged me to be a better human being, a better man. Don't just say you respect and honor women. Let's see this in practice. Let's see love in practice. You know, one of the things that Evangeline even asked me once in the beginning of our relationship, have you ever actually experienced unconditional love in your life other than from your mother? And I got quiet because I was like, wow, I don't even know if I even sought that out, because we're not even encouraged as men to seek out healthy, loving relationships. It's about conquering, it's about domination, which is why we made this documentary film on manhood, When We Free the World, because we're like, where did we get these definitions from? Who told us this is the way that we should be with ourselves, with each other? Who told us that we can't be open and vulnerable? Who said that we can't express a range of emotions? Who said that if you happen to be a straight dude like me, a heterosexual dude like me, you only can talk about sports, you only can talk about a money, a job, career, you can only talk about sex and women in ways that are objectifying, and you can't talk about anything else? I mean, there's something wrong with that because you don't realize how you're being put in this box. And when I began absorbing, you know, Bell Hooks and Audre Lorde and Nikki Giovanni and Sonia Sanchez and Alice Walker, you know, in college, it was Richard Wright, it was Mary Baraka, it was Malcolm X, it was men, you know, for the most part, with the exception of Zora Neale Hurston, there I was watching God. It actually began to open my brain up to some stuff. But it's hard to look in the mirror. It's hard to look in the mirror and be honest about the fact, you know what, something Bell Hooks said to me that really stuck with me when she was alive, Karen. She said when she was coming up in the 60s and 70s, when she listened to Black music, she felt that Black men loved Black women, but she felt like once we got past into the 2000s, she said, I feel like Black men via the music actually telling us that they hate Black women. That's a deep
Yes.
statement.
Yeah,
That's a
when
deep
Ace said
statement.
that, he said, I don't think heterosexual men like women. When he said that, it I feel that some of the commentary that I get, and then it's like you're trying to diminish me, you're name calling, you want me to shut up, you want me to,
Yeah.
it's like you don't know, it's all of these things, and it's like how do you arrive at that? Like, who hurt you that this is your response? And I'm not going to react.
Yeah.
I'm usually going to react in a way that will reinforce whatever it is you think. So here you go, take that, because we'll never be able to have a relationship. So it doesn't matter. But when he said that, it just rang in my ear. I was like, that feels right. I do feel the dislike, but it's really stemming from something that you've been taught about yourself. To Malcolm's part, and when you think about Malcolm and his relationship with Betty Shabazz, who
Yeah.
had the opportunity to sit with when I was at the Daily
Wow.
News, I actually, I mean, that's a woman who's intense,
Yeah. Yeah.
and she was holding it down. Okay, when you think about Coretta Scott King, who just had a birthday a few days after ours, for Martin Luther King, you have to have that kind of woman in your life to go out and do the things
Yeah.
and not shrink in violence. Nobody's going to tell you Betty Shabazz or Coretta Scott King were people that are just helpmates. No, no, no. In their own rights, both powerhouses. Betty Shabazz was teaching. She was at what school was she teaching at? Brooklyn College. I think she was a professor when
Meg
I sat
Evers.
with
Meg
her.
Evers.
Medgar Evers.
Meg
Yes,
Evers.
yes. I actually
Yeah.
met with her in her office. Let me ask you, how did you become friends with Bell Hooks? Because that's not
That's a
just I interviewed her, but y'all were friends.
I interviewed her. I did interview her for Vibe magazine because you know what happened when I was engaging in very destructive behavior in the early '90s. There was a group of sisters, including sisters from Spelman College. Shout out to Spelman College, who said you need to read Bell Hooks and you need to read Pearl Clegg's book Mad at Miles. They told me what to read. Like you need to, if you're serious, here's what you read. And I began to read these books. I was terrified as a man. I ain't gonna lie. At that time, I was like, man, what are they trying to say? Because I was defensive, and it's like when you are introduced to ideas that are upsetting how you have seen yourself in the mirror all this time, it's like an internal hurricane that's going on. But over a couple of years, I was like, well, I would like to interview Bell Hooks, because I also knew that Bell Hooks was interested in it. Bell Hooks paid attention to everything. She loved hip hop. She was a fan of Tupac. She was a fan of many people. And so I asked her if she'd be willing to do an interview with me for Vibe magazine. We called the interview, Bell being the person she was, she said, well, can you call the article Uncut Funk? That's the title of the article. The interview. She gave me the title, and she dropped gems about Pac, about hip hop, about the state of America at that time, all kinds of stuff. And she allowed me to sit at her feet for like the next 20 years, Karen. I would just spend time when she was living in New York. I'd go to her apartment, sit there and just talk and listen. And, you know, one of my favorite conversations I've ever done, people can go to YouTube and find it, is if you Google Bell Hooks and Kevin Powell at the New School, I think it was 2015. It's one of my favorite conversations with anyone, because we just talked about all of this stuff of how you deconstruct manhood. Where do we get these definitions from? You know, and she was stuff who also was really big on, you have to understand, you know, where we came from, how these things are passed along from generation to generation. You know, she was talking about trauma before it became a buzzword for people, and triggers and things like that. But I learned a lot from her, and I got to say goodbye to Bell as she was dying in Berea, Kentucky. She had gone back to Kentucky, her home state. And, you know, she couldn't talk, but I just was, you know, I just held her hand. I'm there crying. I just said, thank you for teaching me. And I wrote a poem for Bell that people can find on Essence Magazine website. It's like, I think it's called A Letter to Bell Hooks. But she is one of the biggest influences in my life in terms of redefining manhood. And I would argue that my film would not exist the way it does, When We Free the World, if it wasn't for Black women like Bell Hooks and Toni Morrison and Alice Walker and Audre Lorde, because they gave me a different perspective on how to view manhood. This film will not exist without my wife as co-producer and co-writer, as a Black woman who has a father who's in her life as president, who has a brother who's had relationships with Black men. Her perspective was very important, because otherwise we're reinforcing the same old stuff, which is, you know, Black men just need to take their place in the head of the household, and we the kings of the community, things like that. No, how about we actually figure out partnership? You know what I mean? Figure out, if we're talking about the binary for a second, heterosexual relationship for a second, how about we figure out partnerships? When I look at social media, one reason why it's so toxic to me, you see brothers and sisters going at each other. You see dudes saying the most hateful stuff about Black women.
Yes.
And you're like, how did we get to this point where it does feel like a lot of us actually only see y'all? You used the word transactional earlier. I would argue we see y'all as transactional. Can I have sex with you? And can you take care of me? Can you be a mother figure for me? That's how a lot of us view y'all, as strictly transactional.
Experience Karen Hunter in a completely different way. Karen Hunter is awesome. The podcast.
If you like me on SiriusXM Urban View Channel 126, you're gonna love me. And Karen Hunter is awesome. Hey, this is Karen Hunter, host of the Karen Hunter Show on SiriusXM's Urban View. Karen Hunter is Awesome is an actual podcast to bring heat and energy and knowledge and power, a 1-2 punch that I don't think you get anyplace else. Tell the truth. So check out the podcast wherever you get your podcast. You will not be disappointed.